Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the fourth training session for the eSmart project, Interreg Alpine Space. So last week we had a training about training material, and this time we are going to talk about best practices for e-mobility implementation in public transport and logistics. But before starting, we have some rules. First, as you may know, the meeting is being recorded for the signature lists. And if you do not have a good quality connection, or even if you have one, please keep your webcam off to increase the quality of the connection. Please stay mute during the presentations. And maybe you will be asked to activate your webcam for a screenshot. So stay connected also. To ask questions, you may interact by chat after the presentation. Normally, after each presentation, you will be asked for questions, and we all will also have some polls, so you'll have many activities to do during this presentation. I'm going to leave the floor to Mrs. Cristina Cavicchioli, who is the project manager of Alpine Space eSmart project. Please, Cristina.
Thank you, Bruno. Welcome to everybody. I'm Cristina Cavicchioli from RSC, Milan, Italy. And today my role is to shortly introduce you eSmart project, an Interreg Alpine Space program funded project that has an objective to support the development of a strategic and operational instrument and tools, ICT and policy tools to support e-mobility implementation in the local public transport and in the last mile logistic, with a common solution for all the Alpine space area. So eSmart main objectives is to increase the public administration capability to plan infrastructure for planning the electrification of the last mile logistic and the public transport in strong cooperation with the private sector. We let us deep now a bit the project concept and the product. In red here you can see the policy cycle, and we listed the steps that we consider are needed for a good planning. And in blue, you can see the project support action that we develop in these 2 years. So if we start with the top action, it is the problem definition, purpose, and scoping, and eSmart supported this phase with its fundamentals that are based on European directive and also regional and national legislation. Then if we see the stakeholder engagement phase, we developed the creation of a specific living lab methodology with 2 levels that are that is customized to the specific issues of the planning for electrification of last mile logistic and local public transport. Then we also supported the policy in engineering phase by means of the definition of the main features of the ecosystem approach to a smart city. And we devoted a really good deliverable inside our project deliverables to that. Then we also supported the phase of a choice of a solution and policy option by means of smart roadmaps. We developed 2 roadmaps, a tactical one that give a common framework and links the policy activity to the European policy main policies, and also to tactical roadmaps that we customize to each region, and they are customized on national scale. We also supported the enhancing of data by means of the development of a project toolkit that we will present the 31st of March in a next meeting, and that helps to combine data from different sources in order to develop sound indicators that helps to get a good policy based on sound data. We also supported policy validation by means of a letter of commitment that strongly involve the stakeholders. And also we we made some action to support policy activation and review. And in particular, we used training action. We developed workshop and webinars. And today we are working on a specific training session, the 4th one, the one in which we present the best practices that were collected by project partners in their territories. Each of these presentation of this training session are recorded and will be put on the project website. So we remaining connected. You agree with this to participate and to be recorded and put on the project website. We, as I told you before, we are also planning a fifth meeting in which we will present the project toolkit. So today we will show the collected best practices that are many, 35, and they are in digital format and all in English languages. We clustered the best practice in 4 main clusters, one on energy issues, one on policy and governance, one on technical issues as digitalization, technical problem on charging station, or on specific elements on last mile logistic, and also a 4th one, a 4th cluster on the urban and peri-urban planning of e-mobility. Here the list of the best practices that you will find in the website, and the next presentation, our presenter will present these training, these best practices, and give you more details. My role today is completed. I remember you the project website, and I give the floor to Bruno to introduce the today presenters. Thank you, Bruno.
Thank you, Christina. So we are going to dive into the subject. We have 4 presenters who accepted to share the best practices in 4 different domains. First, urban and peri-urban planning. So Mr. Rok Ban from the automotive cluster of Slovenia will explain us all that what we have to know about this subject as best practices for eSmart. Second speaker is Mrs. Sarah Zaiss from Munich. She will talk about policy and governance. And then Mrs. Alessia PAdalino from Codognotto Group. She's going to talk about energy. And finally, we'll have Mrs. Federica Savini from RSC in Milano for technical issues. And to start, I'm going to leave the floor to Rok. Rok, it's up to you.
Thank you, Bruno and Christina. Please allow me to share my presentation.
Now you should.
Okay, and I think we see it. So let us be quick because we have a lot of best practices to present. And let us start with what do we need in new mobility? New mobility practices should be clean, accessible, and inclusive. And I think all the best practices presented address at least some of those paradigms. So let us start. How do we achieve implementation of the new mobility? Through electric local public transport, through new infrastructure concepts, through electric and carbon neutral delivery, and everything other which I grouped into new mobility concepts. So let us start with electric local public transport. Because we have so many best practices, I group them into small-scale implementation and large-scale implementations, where a really small % of the fleet is electrified. I said it's small-scale implementation, large-scale implementation, where a large number of buses is incorporated into the existing fleet. So let us start with small-scale implementation. The first one is e-buses in Valence. I hope that I pronounced that correctly, which are running from 2018, and they started with the purchase of 13 buses and plan for about 10 more. Out of the complete fleet, which is around 220 vehicles, there was 8 million euros invested, and there was some. Could you please mute yourself? Thank you. And there were some lessons learned. One is that already the bus autonomy of electric buses is sufficient for everyday transport. The significant lower noise and greenhouse gas pollutions is having a great improvement on quality of life of residents, but there are some problems, and those are high cost of charging infrastructure and legal issues for construction of bus depots and also charging points. Let us go to the next best practice. This is the project Move to Zero in Graz, Austria. I really hope this one becomes a large-scale implementation, but right now they're only in demonstration phase and use 7 electric buses and 7 fuel cell buses. They also try to achieve full decarbonization of urban public transport and integration of on-demand services in Graz, which include several aspects of automated and connected mobility, which is the future of public transport if we are looking at the situation today. The next best practice is LPT on demand in municipality of Schellen. I hope that I pronounced that correctly, where the objective is to lower the emissions and to relieve traffic congestion with creation of flexible on-demand bus shuttle for rural areas, where they try to develop software to effectively plan routes, establish virtual bus stations, and raise awareness for local public transport in population which normally uses their private transportation. They will also use alternative propulsion for buses, some from natural gas and some from electricity. The next best practice is the pilot project of electric bus lines in Lido of Venice, where they try to electrify public transport on islands of Lido and Palestrina, with a budget of 22 million euros, they're trying to develop a public transport network equipped with suitable electric vehicles and recharge points to support the population. This is the really first large-scale project in Göteborg, Sweden, where they are trying, in collaboration with public authorities, with energy providers, with charging point operators, with local public transport providers, and bus manufacturers, which in this case is Volvo. They're trying to implement 160 buses, electrify 34 routes, and establish 13 locations with charging points, and basically electrify a large scale of public transport in the city. The project is it's ongoing, and they transferred from plug-in hybrid buses to full electric buses during this time. Then we have the only best practice, which is not located in Europe. It's electrification of rapid bus transit fleet in Bogota, Colombia. They are purchasing almost 1,500 electric buses and electrifying 15 bus roads, which seems small for the number of buses, but after a little more of research, I realized those buses are huge, because this is the special line they use for mass transit of people, and will be able to provide significant reductions in CO2 and particulates. And also there will be a creation of, like in all the other large-scale implementation of e-buses, of small fast charging stations along the route, and in combination with on-depot charging overnight. The next best practice is 100% electrification of bus fleets of ATM Milano. In the years from 2018 to 2030, that they're planning to spend around 1.5 billion euro to fully electrify their bus fleet, together with the improvements of needed infrastructure, and to lower emissions of greenhouse gases and provide better service for the residents. It's a really huge project, and I invite everyone to check this on the as well as other projects on the eSmart page. Also in Turin, they are trying to electrify a larger part of their bus fleet of 50, with purchase of 50 electric vehicles out of the fleet of almost 900, and establishing 400 charging points to charge those vehicles. The time frame is since 2018, and it's a good project with the similar goals to other e-bus implementation, like lowering CO2 emissions, lowering particulate emissions, and lowering noise pollution. And now we are on the new mobility concepts. Let's start with the commune of Crest, where they established autonomous electric shuttle between a railway station and the activity zone, which is around 5 kilometers away. The shuttle is completely autonomous with 10 passenger seats, and but for the testing purposes, there is one employee on the shuttle at all times. I have only the information for the first 4 months of operation, in which the shuttle traveled around 2,000 kilometers and carried 4,000 passengers. It's also quite budget friendly, with only 220,000 euros spent. So maybe this will be a great use case for autonomous vehicles in smaller communities. The next mobility concept is another one that is great for small communities, which is electric car sharing for rural areas in the municipality of La Chapelle and Vercroix, where they tried to, they implemented a used electric car for shared use by local residents and local tourists. And the interesting thing about the project is it's not really digitalized. It's very simple, and it can be a good pilot project for smaller municipalities with lower funds and not a lot of staff to keep track of large digitalized car sharing solutions. And then one of the best documented best practices that I came across, which is iShare Life, which is electric car sharing solution for small and medium urban areas, which is also the only international best practice reported between Italy and Croatia, where they are trying to figure out which of the 5 electric car sharing models are best for optimization of use of the vehicles, and it's focused on different users / drivers. So some from some business-to-business concepts, some business-to-customer concepts, and I think this is a very well-defined project with good, with so much written about it that I can't include everything in these short presentations, but according to project literature, it was extremely successful, and it brought a lot of new charging infrastructure and car sharing locations in both countries. The next mobility concept is e-way, which is aimed at development and promotion of sustainable mobility in urban areas in Garda area in Italy, where they are trying to holistically approach the whole ecosystem of electric mobility with IT support, with car sharing, with charging station and other infrastructure, and mostly to alleviate traffic congestion in the tourist season. Even in 2020, which wasn't a very tourist-friendly year, the vehicles traveled more than 76,000 kilometers. And the project is successful between all the municipalities in the region that are involved. Then we come to the infrastructure concept, which is e-hubs, which in 6 countries and 7 cities there is a project which aims to create hubs for charging electric vehicles, either micro mobility such as bikes, scooters, cargo bikes, or even larger cars, larger vehicles like cars or vans, to mostly promote electric mobility and show a great example in use of green mobility solutions in city centers. And for the last best practice I will present, we have the only best practice aimed to reducing emissions in last mile logistics, which is delivery with e-cargo bikes in the city of Strasbourg, where they started intermodal concept of delivering goods into city center with river shuttles and electric bikes, which are able to, the bikes are able to transport more than 300 kilos of goods in single ride, and are already distributing goods on 600 or more than almost 7,000 addresses in Strasbourg, and they're trying to expand in more than a dozen cities in France, England, and Belgium. Thank you for listening. I hope that you heard something new, and will be able to research those best practices on our project eSmart webpage and other ways on the internet. Thank you for listening again.
Thank you, Rok. I thought we were supposed to have polls, but maybe I lost something. Anyway, we can have questions from the audience. If you have some questions about these best practices, please feel free to react in the chat. And if you are not ready to do so, maybe you can think a bit and ask later on, and we'll go directly. Yeah, first question. 1.5 billion euro in Milan. What does it encompass? So we are looking for someone to answer this question. Very technical.
We can give you more details. We know that the local agency for public transport want to renew all the buses of the fleet and build some depot with the electric charging, because the charging scheme that was adopted was a mixed one, but based mainly on charging in depot with some strategic point around the town for opportunity charging. So we see in the best practice the transformation of the depot from a normal depot to a full electric depot. And also they are planning to renew all the fleet, and also to build the opportunity charging site around the town. This is the most that we know, but if you are interested to deep a bit, we can get in contact with the stakeholder that give us this information.
Thank you, Christina. Currently, there are no additional questions. So maybe
I think we have two questions, am I right?
Yeah,
like
okay.
Two poll questions, or are we waiting for later with them?
Sorry.
Maybe the question for Rok, shall we start the poll now?
Rok is mute.
Yes, you can start the poll. I think, or should I do something?
No, I can start it.
Okay.
So there is a poll, actually. Please answer a question, but have you ever used electric local public transport, and how would you rate your experience? So very simple. A few seconds before the results.
I'll give you 10 more seconds. And now I think you should see the results.
Okay, the good news is that nobody had a worse experience than conventional vehicle. Great.
I think we have a second one.
Second question, in your opinion, what should primary investments in local public transport focus on? improving the size of local public transport network, investments in alternative fuel infrastructure and fleets, digitalization of local public transport, or development of new mobility solutions.
Okay, a few more seconds. And then I will stop now the poll and show you the results.
So it's logical. We are on a webinar about electric mobility. So the majority of people think that investments in alternative fuel infrastructure and fleets is a good idea. And then it's improving the size of local public transport network. And yes, okay. Anything else? Were only 2 questions?
Yeah, yes, only 2.
Okay. So thank you. Thank you, Rok. And now we are going to talk about something quite different, about policies and governance. And I'm going to leave the floor to Mrs. Sarah Zaiss from Germany, who is going to address this subject. Sarah, it's your turn.
Yes, thank you. Let me quickly share my screen. So, hello and welcome from my side as well. I will introduce you today to the best practice which were collected on the field of policies and governance. And I would like to connect the best practice to the training actions that were presented last week. So during my last speech, I mentioned that a forward-looking government, or a forward-oriented government, plans the future with the necessary infrastructure in a forward-looking manner and sets appropriate framework conditions for user-oriented transportation services. And this must be done taking into account the need of the economy, the population, and as well regard to the environment and land consumption. So now we are focusing on the framework conditions, which of course need to meet the people's needs, like reduction of the traffic-related CO2 emissions, or like reduction of traffic noises, and so on and so on. And these framework conditions come by several incentives and regulations, also named here in our context, the push and the pull measures. And this is where I would like to dig in and ask you directly one question. Maybe we can open the poll. Yeah, and the question is, in your opinion, what is the biggest driving force or pull factor for e-mobility in general? So is it funding, is it digital and technical development, or is it the operating costs? Which one do you choose? Give you a few more seconds here.
I'm going to stop the poll now.
Let's have a look. Okay, great. So the right answers, all of them are right answers, but funding is of course a big issue. And it turns out that we need these push and pull factors to increase the number of electric vehicles and the charging infrastructure. So we can close here and directly look at the push and pull measures. So to give you the hint where I want to go, the best practices in this field in the policies and governance show great similarities and represent important driving forces and supporting technologies for public administrations and, of course, medium-sized companies in the field of e-mobility. So in the actual toolkit, the best practices are, of course, way more detailed, represented, but I will just give you a brief overview. Here you have the 3 important pull factors. As you can see, the funding options and the funding programs is also mentioned. The operating costs means like savings in energy and maintenances, or the battery development is also really important. And we also have the technical and digital development, meaning, for example, the increasing number of charging solutions or the optimization of range and load capacity. So now I will give you an overview over the 4 best practices that were collected. As you can see, all of them are at some point digital. First of all, we have a best practice from Italy, from Lombardy region, called Ecomops. And the idea is to create an ecosystem to support regional sustainable mobility planning in giving a tool, a digital tool, a platform. And its benefits is creating digital relationships among stakeholders. They can share and enrich their own data, and it also allows public administrations to identify, for example, priorities to support sustainable mobility. This best practice is also funded by regional funding options. The second one is a little bit different. It is half digital. So here we have a best practice also from Italy, Piedmont. And the best practice is to edit tender documents for purchasing electric buses and electric charging infrastructure. It is more or less a supporting document. And it is said that this type of technical document helps you to save money during the preparation of the public tender and ensures a standard in the area. So, and this is also supported by funding. The third best practice comes from Germany, and it is an instrument for the stabilization of electromobility in municipalities and municipal companies. It's a funding program itself. So it is a concept of a funding program. And what it does exactly is that, you can get funding for implementing your own electromobility concept in smaller municipalities. And this funding call were followed by nearly 200 municipal electromobility concepts, and currently half of them are already implemented. So till now it was also a great success. And last but not least, we also have an eHub best practice. It's a different one that the one we heard before. It is an output of the eMoticum project, which is the pre-project of eSmart. So also a Alpine Space Interact project. And it is a virtual and physical help desk to support the planning of charging infrastructure. There are 8 eHubs, 1 per country. And it is also kind of a data platform so has also the digital background. Okay, so far this. And what is also interesting, of course, who are the target groups, or for whom is the best practices made for? So the main target groups are stakeholders in the e-mobility concepts, small and medium-sized companies, and of course the public administrations. Yeah, and on the one hand, important actors, but on the other hand, they also need great support. So we still got here our conclusion that sharing and enriching data, creating digital relationships, and of course, cost and time efficiency can lead us to the diffusion of e-mobility, and all the best practices have it in it, have tools in it to set this up. So yeah, thank you very much. I hope I could interest you. And if you have questions, you can ask them now. Or later in the chat.
Thank you, Sarah. I cannot see any questions for now, but maybe they can come, or maybe if it's not now, the question, how do you connect these different players?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. And that was the last training session all about. So in the training sessions or in the training activities for policies and governance, I talked about the importance of corporations and to foster public-private partnerships. And I think that's still the best solution to run this kind of projects. So look for stakeholders and partners and build new corporations.
If I may add, Sarah, this is a digital tool that support cooperation and make easy the exchange of information among stakeholders, and it represents a hub for information, but also for getting in contact. So it helps. Yeah, we checked during Emoticon project that it was really useful in many countries, and these hubs are still living also now after some years. So the digital tools were created by well, I know we do not have in Munich this tool because Landkreis Munich was not a partner, but in Germany, maybe in Kempten, I can't remember. I know there is in Italy, in Slovenia, and in France, but I'm not sure. I have to check, and I can give you more information about Germany. But the public administration that was usually regional or urban one created its own web portal, and then added inside the portal the tool that they consider relevant to aggregate the stakeholders. So it was not a receipt, but we give the opportunity to the public administration to choose among some different tools and to implement them in their portal. I can give you more information and send you by email on if some German best practice were implemented. I apologize, but some years ago was closed the project, and I'm not sure my memory fits.
Thank you, Christina. If there are no additional questions, thank Sarah for her presentation. And now I'm going to leave the floor to Mrs. Alessia PAdalino, who is going to talk about energy, best practice for energy. We cannot hear you, Alessia.
Okay. Hi. Can you hear me now? Do you see the presentation?
Yes. Yes, we do.
That's great. So thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Felix, I think that we will start with the first question, maybe.
1 second.
Thank you. So the question is, are you familiar with the concept of electricity distribution networks at a reserve state? Since we discussed energy here together, I would like to know your answer.
Okay, 5 more seconds to go.
Yeah. Okay, great. Almost a half and a half, let's say. So thank you, Felix. So since we had this question, let me check if we can move. Okay. A brief recap in any case of these two concepts. So on one hand, we have the electricity distribution networks, which are important part of the power delivery system and transport electricity from transmission networks to end-use customers. On the other hand, we have the electricity reserve state, which refers to the electricity suppliers that are not currently being used, but can be quickly available in case of an unexpected loss of generation. As a quick premises, I would like also to say that nowadays, energy distribution grids are taking a much more central role in energy system due to the integration of small-scale decentralized renewable generation, along with the spread of distributed energy resources such as residential rooftop, photovoltaics, or commercial industrial ones, domestic batteries, and electric vehicles. Within the eSmart project, we identified a best practice in Slovenia, aimed to improve capacity of distribution networks for additional loads. Today, one of the main problem is the quality. Yes, because the increase in electricity consumption in many cases is not longer possible to supply all the necessary electricity in case of reserve status without violating quality standards. As a result, requests for increased connection capacity are rejected by the distribution company, as network upgrading can be very costly and therefore not economically feasible. The question that, let's say, consequently arises is how can we solve this issue? And this is the basis of this best practice that we are bringing here today to you. So it has been seen that when the consumer is ready to adapt his consumption in rare case of operation in the reserve state, the distribution company can offer him more power during normal operation. As a result, more energy is supplied on the existing grid, and therefore the consumer can increase his production, the distribution generates more turnover, and all other energy consumers have to pay lower grid charges due to the optimal use of existing grid resources. In order to ensure an increasingly reliable service within this evolving scenario, let's say, distribution network operators needs to play the role of orchestrators in energy systems, deploying investments program to make grids more robust, reliable, and also including through advanced technologies that enhance network automatization and control capabilities, reducing loads. So here today we are talking about automatization of the local processes. In this way, the consequence is that the practice enables power increase where network capacity in reserve state does not allow such connection. We can say that the lesson learned of this best practice is that first, the solution and their implementation must be aligned with national regulation. And the second one is that there may be technical problems, such as, for example, the transmission reliably, the load reduction through the remote meter reading system, not intended for hard real-time communication. We believe that this could be a very useful case for the last mile logistic, but also for the local public transport charging infrastructure provision, since additional power needed in usually very loaded urban distribution networks with expensive and limited expansion possibilities. In addition to this, we also believe, and we would like also to highlight, that for a real transition towards a more productive, efficient, and environmentally conscious world, the distribution grids need to embrace a new sustainability also principle, encouraging the use of electricity as the simplest and most natural choice for all citizens to contribute to a net zero future. And that's all. Thank you very much. I don't know if you have questions.
Thank you, Alessia. Are there any questions? There were. No question for now. We had only one best practice for energy, but
so far,
yeah. Do you have a graphic to explain the power demand shift reserves, the power demand shift versus reserves? Yes.
I don't have at the moment here, let's say in the PowerPoint, but we could get in touch also with Christina, I believe, and provide you with more information about that.
Yes, sure. We can ask more detail to the stakeholder.
So if it's that all, maybe you, Alessia, you could remove your screen sharing.
Sure. Thank you again.
And thank you, thank you, Alessia. And now for turn of Federica Savini, we are going to talk about urban mobility technical issues and best practices for this. And
hi everyone, can you hear me?
yes, we can.
Okay. So I'm Federica Savini, and I will talk to you about some urban mobility technical issues as the last part of our best practices session. So urban mobility is essential, as we know, as we have seen from the previous presentation. And one way to have e-mobility and transport sector evolution is to try to implement and develop some best practice and techniques, because this is essential for energy transition and sustainable cities. So I have here 15 best practices on different topics: local public transport, freight transport and last mile logistics, infrastructure, and smart city platform. So there are quite a few, and I will give you some information on each best practice, but you are invited to look for more details, such as cost or project duration and some more technical details on our website, where this material will be available. So let's start with the local public transport best practices. And we start with the INSIT EV, which is an Horizon 2020 project, which among the many objectives and outputs aims to build a charging hub in a park and ride facility in the outskirts of Turin in Italy. So this will include a wide choice of charging stations. And the interesting thing is that these stations will be powered by the tramway network. This is still in the pilot phase, but the potential is to be easily replicated in all the contexts with a stable and powerful tramway network. So the local public transport is connected to the possibility to recharge private vehicles. Then we move to Slovenia, the city of Koper. We have the local public transport agency here that was interested in having 4 electro minibuses, and they had to overcome some grid limitations in order to have this network working. So they had to carefully plan timetables, so the minibuses were not charging at the same time, going to the depot to charging at the same time. And then also they had a smart charger to that tells which vehicle should go first to recharge and decide the order of recharging. So they are not really overlapping altogether while charging. And so they overcome all the grid limitations in this way, like efficiency. And this was the first local public transport electrical vehicle fleet in Slovenia. And on average, each minibus drives more than 200 kilometers per day. Then we have the local public transport company in Venice, and they decide to build an electric cabins and also fast charging points for public vehicles. And this was done both in depots and along the roads. And they had the opportunity to rearrange some areas and also requalify green areas, redesign road signs and parking spaces. And of course, there were difficulties encountered during these best practice ideas or implementations. One was for sure the timing of authorization procedures and also the funding, looking for funding, but also getting them. Another issue was the context of architectural, environmental, landscape value, like in the case of Venice, which is really a peculiar site. Then also, of course, these kind of operations need to be a partnership among different actors, customers, transport agencies, and energy companies. And also grid managers need time to make decisions. So all these best practices require a contribution of different actors, but also some time. Then we go to freight transport and last mile logistics best practices. Here we have the case of Logistic Tram, which is a project sponsored by the city of Frankfurt in Germany. And they are thinking to use local public trams to transport goods in combination also with depots and cargo bikes. So it would be a totally free emission way of moving goods as part of the last mile logistics. And this is still in the pilot phase, but it's interesting because it could be replicated easily in all the cities with a tramway network. So that we are making use of the connections and the rights available, but to use to move goods instead of only people and passengers. Then we move to Ninvirta, which is a private sector experience, is a company, Italian company, and they decide to try road transport with medium heavy electric vehicles to distribute goods in urban areas. And they found, so this was the first experience in Italy of road transport with heavy vehicles. And they found electro last mile logistics particularly useful because they could deliver their goods also in cities where sometimes there are traffic restrictions due to the air quality. So they could still deliver and move in urban areas even when there are restrictions. Then last one is the Klagenfurt in Austria. Here the municipality decided to try converting part of the light vehicle fleet of service providers to electric fleet. Sorry? So how could they do it? They provided an incentive package which could help purchasing new vehicles, but also giving free parking spots or I don't know, reduction of taxes, and so all the sort of incentives that could convince service providers to electrify their own fleet, and also the opportunity to test the electric vehicles for a month before making a decision to indeed change their vehicles and fleets. And this turned out in more than 200 electric vehicles. And within the project, also a photovoltaic park was built in order to provide and produce the renewable electricity to charge these vehicles. In the end, they turned out in an annual saving of more than 700 tons of CO2. Here we move from last mile logistics to freight transport with a TalkNet, which is a project sponsored by Codognotto. So in particular, Codognotto Polska in Zrem in Poland decided to test the natural gas fueled heavy vehicles to transport goods from Poland to UK, crossing different European countries. And this turns out in the real possibility of using natural gas fueled vehicles for the Central Europe macro area. But this requires careful planning of the route, of course. This is due to the limited number of stations that are available along the route. So here some difficulties were the lack of manufacturers of both electric and LNG trucks, and also the high initial cost. This is true for electric vehicles, but also for the natural gas vehicles. And again, lack of infrastructure that is used for recharging in case of electric heavy vehicles or fueling the natural gas. Now we move to the infrastructure best practices. Here we have the Electro Ljubljana DSO, who decided to simplify the charging point system through a common use. So every charging point owner can be part of a larger system. This is done mainly to avoid additional costs, but also to ease the payment systems, for example. And this best practice stimulates the installation of more charging point systems. And in Ljubljana, almost 100 locations were additionally covered thanks to this practice. Now, the last one for infrastructure, Drive Vehicle to Grid is a joint venture between a startup and a consortium, and they think to use private and commercial electric vehicles to store and supply energy that can be then provided to infrastructures or buildings according to their needs. Of course, this is the basic vehicle to grid, and this is based in Paris. And the best practice is to involve not only energy actors and suppliers, but also consumers. So they are aware of their role in the sustainable development idea, and also they can have some advantages in this kind of practice. Here, these two best practices are quite new on the market. So of course, there could be reluctance from the providers, and also a commercial scale up is needed. This is not that much diffused, specifically for vehicle to grid. Now we move to the last part of the best practices. These are about smart cities, smart city platforms. Here we are in France with the platform Delmonicos. This is the idea is to optimize the electrical vehicle charging process with a universal software solution. This includes an operating system and also a monitoring platform. The idea is that the EV drivers will have access to an international network of charging stations using an app where they can compare the charging rates and fees. And then we have Omni. This is a tool for system and fleet analysis for public administrations. The idea is that they can simulate different scenarios for the electric bus replacement. So they could see the replacement rate along the years, the cost, the emission savings, and so on. So they can make decision on how much, how many, and when the buses can be replaced. Then we move to Slovenia. Here we have the T2 platform. This is a data collection from IoT devices, such as sensors. And this platform can be used both by PAs and citizens to get information about their area in real time. And this is really challenging, but they can in real time see their data and data analysis using an app, website, or messages even. Then we move to Italy. We have the UCA Smart City platform developed by the Piedmont region. This platform has really a lot of possibilities. One of them is to monitor the local public transport electrical vehicle fleet. So the data sets are always updated, and we always know the fleet composition of the cities that implement this kind of platform. Then we have NLX City Analytics. This is a complex platform that collects data on people mobility, but also on vehicular traffic and even on road surface quality. It was implemented in the city of Savona, for example. And then the last one is Roma. We have Rome City Data Platform. This is a typical smart city platform with a lot of sources for data, so really heterogeneous data sets. And this is part of the digital policy development strategy in order to make digitalization really implemented. So for all these platforms, it's true that we want to give the possibility to operators to base their decisions on meaningful data. So data analysis really based on real cost structures, CO2 savings, CO2 emission savings, charging infrastructure configuration that is then really based on the demand. And also they all give the possibility to compare historical data sets with real time, if any, and statistics. And this can be really useful not only for public administrations, but also for the users. like citizens. Some difficulties for this best practice were the lack of real interoperability between the charging station network datasets, the fact that there are many players working together, and there could be also pressure from some players that are not really interested in sharing their information or in changing the business, their business. Then also difficulties in involving local public transport agencies in updating their datasets. Also, lack of cooperation among municipalities to form consortiums and share their information and work together. And finally, lack of knowledge or time for education the personnel from public administrations, which who could be unfamiliar with data-driven policies and analysis. So finally, I gave a very quick overview of these 15 best practices that were clustered in 4 topics: local public transport, freight transport, last mile logistics, infrastructure, and smart city platforms. And I would like to know if you can tell which one you think were the most interesting, effective, and innovative in terms of macro area, like the one you would go for more details on our website. If Felix, you can launch the poll. Okay. So like among the last mile logistics, local public transport, smart city platforms, and infrastructure, the one you think were more challenging or innovative and interesting?
I'll give it 5 more seconds. Okay.
Okay, I also voted for last mile logistics, which is I think it was really interesting, the possibility of having the connection with the local public transport rights to use last mile logistics, and this is also maybe more innovative in general, and is also because also it involves private service providers, but also of course smart city platforms. We always talk about that, but it's good to maybe go and look for more details on how these are really used and implemented. Okay, thank you. So here you can find the list of all the best practice I presented, and the material will be available on the website. And that's it. I leave the floor to Bruno. Thank you.
Thank you, Federica. We have the opportunity to ask questions. So photo. We'd like to have an overall picture of all the participants. So for this, we need that everybody activates his or her video so that we have a picture of the participants. So that's the time, please.
Yeah, I do. I make a picture. No.
And in the meantime, we had a question that arose. So when picture time is finished, we have also question time.
It's finished. Thank you.
Thank you. So you may switch off your camera if you want. And now the question was, do you have any recommendation how the proliferation of many different platforms can be avoided? As a user, I do not want to have a multitude of applications for a similar objective. And there was another question, who, according to you, should play the role of the conductor?
Well, Federica, if you want to answer, or I can try to
do
give
both. So as far for the best practice I studied, let's say, I think that the one that has been more successful from the material I read, at least, was the one that was designed by Enelix, which is the Italian company that works specifically on digitalization and the electric network, but also the one from the Piedmont region, which has been able to collect really heterogeneous data sets and to make really good data analysis out of it. So I think the conductor, if you think for the manager of the application, could be either a private company, but also the public administrations, if they have the possibility to collect more data sets. And in terms of different platforms, I understand that it could be annoying, but it depends on the city where you live. So of course, in this case, these platforms that were really planned for a specific city. So like Rome could have really different needs with respect to a city like Venice, for example. And but the idea of the one for multiple charging information that could be on a European basis, that would be good, just not to avoid overlapping of different platforms. So either it's applied to a specific city, or then maybe if it's about the charging network system, should be homogeneous for sure. But that's really, I would say, the next step. So first, the first step is to collect data sets, and so they could be really interoperability among these data sets and charging systems, and then they could there could be a platform of platforms like the one that actually Smart is building. So maybe Christina can say something on that prototype.
Thank you, Federica. I was going, yes, to talk about the project toolkit that is something that want to give a common scheme to different countries, to different needs of different cities or region. And there is also a need not to create a new platform, but to make data sharing. And this is the aim of the project toolkit too. I also consider that this approach, the opportunity that the planning of electromobility gives to a public administration is also a push towards the smart city approach. So we consider that also small town and wider territories can approach the smart territory approach, working on the planning of mobility that consider data sharing as a need. And I agree with Mr. Lisek that this is also a place for public and private data governance. And I believe that the knowledge in data sharing that is owned by the private can also be shared with or combined by the role of the public administration that can certify and give a feedback also to the private on the need of new infrastructure in some places or in other places. So an exchange between private and public is welcome, and the public and private procurement is sure a good approach.
Thank you, Federica and Cristina. Maybe we are approaching the end of the meeting, and to summarize, to wrap up, I can share. Here you can see the whole list again of the best practices. As you can see, we have a lot of best practices that were presented this morning. We have best practices on urban, peri-urban mobility, about local public transport, both small scale and large scale. We have best practices on new mobility, especially electric car sharing, for example. And we have best practices on new infrastructure concept, e-hubs, on last mile logistics. We have also, and Sarah talked about this, best practices about policies and governance, about what we need to meet the people needs. And we have also one, for the time being, one best practice about energy, about flexibility and load reduction on network. And also we just have an overview of the urban mobility technical issues, best practices for local public transport, smart city, last mile logistic infrastructure. So you feel free to dig into this material to discover what we have not the time to tell about these best practices, to learn what you can find in this. And the location for this is the Alpine Space Eat Smart project, where on the repository you'll find all the best practices. And also we'll have again a new project webinar at the end of the month about the data platform toolkit. So it was already addressed this morning, about the issue was addressed this morning, but we'll present you the output of the project, eSmart project, about data toolkits. So please stay connected. We will have plenty of things to present you, and you'll be able to learn about what eSmart project has to present on this subject. So that was all for my part. Maybe Christina, as a partner, as project leader, could say goodbye, but for me, it's over. Christina.
Thank you, Bruno. Thank you to all of you that remain connected till now to the meeting. I look forward to meet you on the 31st of March, and I will send to the people that make a question in the chat some feedback to learn more on best practices. So stay connected and see you soon. Thank you again.